Hello everybody, Bricky Orchid here. I have your daily dose of story time with the newest DayZ installment, The Adventures of Lance and Damion, Part 1. It was an average summer day in Chernaris. Myself and a friend had been running for half an hour from Cherno to the northwestern airfield. We were kitted out very well. I had full gear and armor along with a Mosin Nagant rifle and pristine long-range scope. My friend had full gear and armor with a fully kitted out M4 assault rifle. We both had enough food and ammo to spare. We had spent the last few hours on a fully populated server fighting off zombies and bandits alike in the Cherno and Electro area. We had many firefights come our way, but we both came out virtually unscathed thanks to way too many hours playing DayZ. My character's name was Lance Norwood, mid-30s and a nice rural miner for many years. He had a wife and kids and lived a hard but happy life in the coal mining areas of Russia. One day on the job, a terrible accident happened. Now you see, Lance's supervisor was a very attractive woman, and Lance knew she liked him very much. While he would never betray his wife, Lance was aroused by this woman's physique and beauty and would often very much chub up on the job. One day, a minecart he was pushing slipped and fell off its tracks. Lance swerved to try and catch the cart, but he couldn't hold it for long. As it fell, he moved his legs out of the way, but he was far too erect and the minecart slammed down on his little Lance. Shortly after, he had to have all of his genitalia removed medically. He was devastated. He couldn't stand going to work as his pride had been soiled. When the zombie apocalypse broke out, Lance's family died when he was visiting his sick mother across the country. Zombies were turning all around him. He fought hard to see his family again. When he got back home to see his family turned and then subsequently killed, Lance Norwood was stricken with grief. He had lost those who supported him since the accident. Suddenly, as he wallowed in sadness, a zombie burst through his window and came soaring at him. It jumped up at him and Lance grabbed a baseball bat his son used to play with. The zombie bit at him as it fell towards his hips. If Lance still had his genitalia, he would have been bitten. But he didn't. And the zombie missed, completely chomping down on nothing as Lance brought the bat down with full force and crushed the zombie's skull. The zombie stood still as Lance dropped the broken bat to the ground and realized he was still alive. He had lost his manhood many months back. He lost his manhood to live that day. He now realizes that he has an advantage nobody else has. He has no fucking dick. He set out that day, ready to purge every last zombie from this world as if it was the last thing he was going to do. He geared up and headed out to whatever this world might throw at him. Lance and Damion came to the gates of the airfield, gave each other a subtle nod, and unslung their weapons. Lance and Damion entered the gates. They checked each and every corner, made sure there were no enemies or zombies alike. Doors were ajar in all the buildings, and there was obvious signs of other player contact, but unlike normal, there was no gunfire. It was frighteningly silent, the only sounds being made were the occasional bird tweet or footsteps that we made through the grass. We sneaked the most possible, but we need to do this fast. Staying for too long caused problems with players server hopping and also could make others aware that we were there. We need to be quick and thorough. Lance kept a sweep of the tarmac, always scoped in when we needed to be. Damion took point with his M4, keeping it raised as a sign of trouble. Damion Fitzgerald, Hot Dunkin' Chugs. A man in his late 40s, early 50s, owner of the very popular Damion Fitzgerald Hot Dunkin' Chugs Coffee and Donuts restaurant in Moscow, Russia. As a kid, Damion always wanted to have a restaurant business. He liked to drink coffee at a very young age, which proved problematic for his parents as he was always hyper to no end. As Damion grew up, he became an excellent pastry maker and learned how to brew his own special blend of coffee at the age of 17. He soon created Damion Fitzgerald's Hot Dunkin' Chugs Coffee and Donuts at 24 years old. Damion was a man of the simple life. He didn't want a lot of money, he just wanted to be content. Damion Fitzgerald's Hot Dunkin' Chugs Coffee and Donuts was always ahead of the curve on new recipes and was never closed or empty. There was always business. Damion bought a house, married a regular customer of his, and they still worked together at the restaurant serving everybody with a smile on their face. But when the zombie apocalypse broke out, Damion was hit full force with it. Being in the center of Moscow, Russia, zombies swarmed his establishment, every undead soul with the intent of tearing down Damion Fitzgerald's Hot Dunkin' Chugs Coffee and Donuts. Damion and his wife fought bitterly. They spent years bringing this shop up and they will not have some mindless rotting sacks tear it down. Damion loved this shop more than anything, maybe even more than his wife. Days went by, weeks, the shop being both a bunker and a war zone. Everything was a weapon, from the simple coffee cup shattered and sharpened to bar stools used as ramming shields. But one day, it was all too much. There were too many. And while the back exit of the shop was clear for escape, Damion would not leave. He knew he was done for, but if he couldn't have Damion Fitzgerald's Hot Dunkin' Chugs Coffee and Donuts, The zombies could not have Damion Fitzgerald's hot Dunkin' Chugs coffee and donuts. Damion and his wife had a propane tank ready to ignite the moment they retreat, but Damion would not stop fighting. He urged his wife to leave him, but she would not. She would die with him fighting inside his shop, Damion Fitzgerald's hot Dunkin' Chugs coffee and donuts. After an hour, Damion realized it was no use. His constant fighting would kill his wife just for personal glory. As they began to retreat, he realized what he must do. He told his wife he loved her as she got clear from Damion Fitzgerald's hot Dunkin' Chugs coffee and donuts. Damion lit the match of the tank of propane and ran. Seconds later, the tank exploded into a huge fireball with body parts and debris raining all over the ground. A single manly tear left Damion's eye as he turned to his wife who had been knocked flat from the explosion, but she didn't move. He turned her over and a piece of Damion Fitzgerald hot Dunkin' Chugs coffee and donuts coffee mug was lodged in her forehead. He shed many manly tears. He realized his attachment to his shop had killed his own wife, and to this day, he will avenge her memory. He will kill every last zombie he saw, and there was no one there to stop him. Damion and Lance moved from barrack to hangar to barrack again. They scouted out the entire airfield with intent of loot, food, and anything else they can get their hands on. They moved quick, they searched quick, nothing was unscathed, but everything was done fast. Finally, they went to the military radio tower in the center of the airfield. Doors were closed this time. They went to the doors, opened them, and saw a fully geared player in a gas mask coming down the stairs. As soon as they saw him, the player yelled "friendly" and unholstered his weapon. The player lifted his SKS rifle as he continually shouted that he was friendly, but Damion didn't care, and when he cut him in half with 60-round clip, it would just be another notch on his rifle. But what he didn't realize was the hornet's nest he just stirred. As if on cue, gunfire hailed towards the ATC tower. Bullets flew in the windows and door while the low hum of gunfire in the far distance rang in their ears. Lance shut the door immediately and they both hit the deck. Damion was already reloading his clip and Lance rolled under the window to peek at their incoming enemies. There were players everywhere. Lance spotted at least 5 moving around to their position and Damion saw even more from the other direction. But they weren't shooting each other. Normally, the Northwest Airfield was a hot spot for the most violence DayZ could contain, but it was quiet today. They now knew the answer why. That player was part of a clan. They didn't realize it before, but that clan had about 15 plus members on this server, and they were almost all at the airfield. They weighed their options quickly. They searched the ATC tower and then the player. They found a spare MP5K on that dead player. Now both Damion and Lance carried a blood bag of their own blood in the case of an emergency. Lance asked Damion to hold his blood bag as he needed space for his MP5K. Lance gave Damion his blood bag and put the MP5K in his inventory. He needed a better weapon with better close range fighting than the Mosin Nagant. They loaded up and they made their plan. Lance would take the second floor and snipe the enemies in the vicinity of the fire station. Then Damion would run to the fire station tower and do the same for Lance. Wasn't the best strategy, but the longer they stayed there, the longer the enemies had to gain a footing on them. They hurried to their positions. Lance began firing at the 2 enemies by the fire station. Both had SKS rifles and they returned fire. However, Lance was an excellent shot and took him out with both clean neck shots. Damion burst from the doors and sprinted to the fire station. Gunfire rained around him. He took a bullet in the back of his vest, but it did not slow his run. As Lance came down the stairs, Damion turned the corner to the fire station and a fresh-looking player with a fire extinguisher took a swing at him and hit him in the head. Damion took the blow with his ballistic helmet and sprayed a third of his clip into him and killed the enemy. Damion took position on the tower and laid suppressing fire down as Lance ran for the station. Lance's run was much smoother since no enemy wants to charge 65.56 rounds being sprayed at them. Lance and Damion met at the bottom of the stairwell. Damion's chest rig was ruined, so he lost all the food he currently carried in it. Other than that, they were solid. They hurried out of the building and towards the fence to find a way out of the ambush. As they turned the concrete wall, gunfire rained at them from 2 players approaching from the airfield. Damion and Lance were stuck at the airfield. There was no way to bargain. They already killed 4 of their clan. There was at least 12 more counted players coming for them. They rushed the construction yard area next to the fire station. They turned the corner, weapons drawn, and saw 2 more enemies approaching them. They were caught off guard, and Damion put 5 rounds into one's face while Lance sprayed a clip into another. 2 more down. 10 left. They kept moving. Aiming was hard as both of them were out of breath. They made it to the military prison and closed the doors behind them. Lance went to the 2nd story and scanned with his Mosin. Ended up putting a clean headshot on an enemy hiding in the grass. Damion was on the ground floor and picked off an enemy that tried to enter the building. They had 8 more to go. Things got quiet. Very quiet. Damion and Lance stayed on constant watch, waiting for enemies to arrive. Lance went downstairs to meet with Damion. As he went to the ground floor, he looked to his left and the door opened in front of him. He shot his Mosa and stuck the enemy in the leg, but as he fell, the player launched 2 shots from his double-barreled shotgun. One missed, but the other hit Lance in the leg and he fell to the ground. He let loose another Mosin shot and hit the enemy in the chest, and he died. Damion came springing out and closed the door. Damion needed the morphine pen for Lance. Damion went for the morphine in his vest, but the vest was ruined, as was the morphine injector. Damion thought for a moment, then checked the player's body. The player had some sticks on him. Damion rearranged his inventory, took out the ruined items so he could tell which was good and which weren't. He tore his shirt into rags and made a splint for Lance. They splinted him up. Lance bandaged himself and ate the remaining food that Damion had while Damion watched the doors. It was getting very quiet again. Footsteps were being made outside the prison. The enemies were slowly surrounding them. Then, a player made a scream sound, followed by a Mosin shot in the distance. What the fuck was... He stopped mid-sentence and a second Mosin shot was fired. Another player not in their clan must have entered the airfield. The other players scrambled for cover and Damion and Lance made good use of the opportunity. They opened the door and sprayed M4 and MP5 rounds all across the field at the scurrying players. They killed 3 while the others ran and hid. Lance and Damion ran from the prison out back towards the construction yard. 4 more had died. Only 4 more and that last rogue player remained. 2 more Mosin shots were fired. The player was still very far away. Another enemy dropped to the ground. 3 left. Damion and Lance were still running. They were only about 50 meters from the gate. They ran into a large forest of trees behind the airfield hangars. A player darted from around the hangars and fired upon them. Lance was hit in the vest, but Damion sprayed the rest of his mag into the player. They had 2 left. They reloaded their weapons. They scanned around the area one more time. The exit was in their sights. They were just about out of this hellhole. "Ready?" asked Damion. "Ready," said Lance. As soon as they stood up, the crack of a Mosin rifle shot at Lance in the leg and he fell to the ground. Damion spun around and saw one of the 2 remaining players left rechambering a Mosin rifle. He laid into him with his M4 and he dropped to the ground. But as soon as that happened, 3 more shots came from behind him and he took a shot in the arm from a .357 Magnum. As he was about to turn around and drop the player hit the ground with a silent thump as a Mosin gunshot that was heard from far away soon followed. The final clan member was dead, thanks to that rogue player. There was no more left. Damion bandaged himself up and went to Lance, but Lance wasn't moving. Lance had his leg broken from the Mosin round and took a shot in the stomach from a wild Magnum round. Damion began to panic. Lance was bleeding and he had just used his last bandage. He ran to the dead player and checked his pack. Nothing. Ran to the other dead player. He had a badly damaged rag with him. Good enough. Ran back to Lance, bandaged him up. He was still unconscious. Lance had lost a lot of blood, both during the prior fights and from these shots. The rogue player was still out there. Damion kept scanning, but saw nobody. The entire airfield was silent, and his friend lay face first unconscious and sanguinated in the grass. Then he remembered. The blood bags. He got into his inventory and found the bag, but he messed with his inventory in the prison trying to get that splint for Lance. He didn't know which blood bag went with who. He stood there, 2 blood bags in his hands, completely frozen. He had a 50-50 chance. He could wait it out, keep Lance warm with a fire and food, but that meant that last rogue player would come looking for them, and he knew he already was. It was either wait it out and hope the player doesn't kill him, or take the chance and give him the blood bag. Damion thought long and hard about this. Then, Damion made his decision. The last time he waited, he lost his wife. He would not make that same mistake again. He grabbed the blood bag and hooked Lance up to it. After a second, the blood was all gone. It went quiet. Damion went prone. They waited. What was less than a minute felt like many, many years. Then he saw Lance move. He looked over. His body went from unconscious to limp. He checked his pulse. He was dead. It was the wrong blood bag. On cue, a sniper shot hit Damion in the face and sent his screen black as well. The rogue player walked over to their bodies, put one more shot in both of them to be sure, took their loot, and left. Damion and Lance killed almost 10 enemy players by themselves. They outlasted all the people they knew, but it had to end sometime. Before the rogue player left, he turned around at them and said, and that, everyone, was the tragic story of Lance Snowwood and Damion Fitzgerald Hot Dunkin' Chugs Coffee and Donuts. The end.